Hey everybody, and hope everyone's doing well. So thank you for tuning into my channel, and thank you for everything as usual. It's definitely appreciated. And if you haven't yet, definitely subscribe and like the video. If you give it a thumbs up, let me know any comments or questions you have. Much appreciated as always. So I wanted to do a video on the nature of I guess space, outer space, or nothing, in other words. Okay, so here's what I mean by that. I was watching a video the other day, and it was the Piers Morgan show, and he was talking about, he had brought up the concept of God and asked, well, how do you explain, the beginning of nothing, like what comes before nothing? He said it's like literally impossible. So existence has to be, therefore, that was his premise. That was how he connected it. He said it's impossible, like what comes before everything, or like infinity. Like it's, our minds can't conceive that or conceptualize it. Therefore, all this must come from a creator being. So that's kind of a big leap or assumption to make. I see what he means, but if you break it down rationally, there is a way to understand this. Like, there's always the question, if God is eternal, what came before him? And I've heard this question, I've asked this question before too, a long time ago, and it's like, well, God is everything. There is no beginning to infinity. That's true. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there is the concept of infinity, which by definition is never ending, is directly equated to a conscious being. In other words, the fact that infinity is real and can be conceptualized doesn't prove or doesn't necessitate the fact of there being an omniscient, omnipresent, all-powerful, all-knowing being that is inseparable from the idea of eternity. So, and actually there's a fascinating story, the story of existence, that I try to piece. We all have our own understandings and beliefs. I'm going to do a separate video on this because I think it's great. And in fact, that's how this started out, but then I kind of went off on a tangent like I usually do. But I thought this was important to kind of explain. So what comes before nothing or everything? So here's the thing. There is no such thing as nothing. The idea of, and this is why science refers to this concept as the space-time continuum, because space is literally infinite. So there is no such thing as nothing, because there is space in every direction, infinitely so. And if you think about it, so just the very idea of, and that is something, you could say there's nothing within this space, but nothing, the idea of nothing literally means like devoid of everything, absent of everything. Space is not nothing. Space is something. So even if there's nothing in it, contained in it, it is eternal. And if you remove all other qualities other than space, all of them, even if it's pure black space, and there's nothing in it, and there's no air, and there's no pressure, it's just one quality, which is space itself, it literally goes on forever. Because if you think about it, it's just true. Conceptually, it is true, because there's no boundaries. Because what if you would have to run into a second quality, something other than space itself, something hard, or something, if you ran into a boundary, or it may not even be hard, it could be something that's very light that you could pass through, but it's a second quality, like in order of what exists, in other words, in that space. So if there's nothing and you just keep going and all of a sudden you run into something, it could be anything, then, and it's like a boundary, for example, or a barrier, how far does that go? Because it has to stop at some point. And if it does, or it may not, that could be eternal too. But that just proves the idea of infinite space again, because what's on the other side of that boundary, for example? there has to be something. It can't be nothing. There literally cannot be nothing. Space continues forever. So it's really interesting to kind of turn that over and think about that, because it just makes the idea of outer space so fascinating. And just how massive our universe is, and we don't even understand that yet. Our numbers keep multiplying, and our understanding of how much is out there continuously grows, and we're just now scratching the surface. So anyways, and I love that sort of thing. I'm really into UFOs and aliens and existential stuff, and all this stuff really. But okay, so now you have the concept of eternal space, right? What the space-time continuum is, what that represents, why scientists refer to that, is because it is literally the fundamental nature of everything. There will always be space, and time is inseparable. It is an innate, inseparable quality that exists within all space, because as you travel, for example, from one throughout infinite space, you can track that time occurs as well. So, and it can happen on a, generally speaking, so, like a linear timeline, for example. If you keep traveling in that direction forever, you can map this thing, how far you go in miles, and how fast you go, or how much time elapses in each second, for example. So time is literally built into the nature of space itself. And even if you're standing in one place, time continues to unfold in the moment, So, and you could track that just by watching your stopwatch, for example. So, this duality is the very basic, one of the fundamental ideas of existence itself. So, the space-time continuum. Now, what exists in this? And scientists are proving this now. So space, it's really fascinating, because remember, everything has a duality. So space can be as big as possible. It goes in every direction forever and ever. But if everything has two directions, it can also go inward. So the nature of space is infinite in both directions. And an interesting way to think about that is, let's say you have your hands apart, right? And then if you cut the distance in between them by half, so say they're like 2 feet apart, and then that's not 2 feet, you know what I mean? So let's say it's like 2 feet apart, and you cut it in half to 1, and then half a foot, and then a quarter foot, and an eighth of a foot. So you could keep creating a smaller and smaller distance, and that number will get infinitely smaller. You will never reach 0. So you can keep dividing, and you will never get to 0. So you go inward. Space goes infinitely inwards and infinitely outwards. So it's another fascinating idea to think about. So that's the starting point. Now, okay, and another fascinating fact, and our scientists are just now realizing this, is that this space is not just empty. So it's not just nothing. It is literally the fabric of space, which, remember, extends in every direction. There is a field of energy. It is literally space, the space-time continuum itself, remember, which is eternal, is literally the next inherent quality in this is energy. So it is literally just teeming with energy in every direction. So in other words, infinite energy. And no matter how small you go, you can source this energy, how far you turn inward, and no matter how much you expand, this energy is everywhere. So, and the idea of this is what I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's called 0-point energy. And we've been onto this for decades now, I think at least 100 to 200 years, and there may have been sacred ancient knowledge about this stuff even before that. But scientifically speaking, with experiments and proof, like Nikola Tesla, who the Tesla car is named after, he was onto this sort of thing and had experiments about 0-point energy. And the idea that you can literally from anywhere at any point in space. I could take this this kind of sphere of energy right in front of me, and if I have the proper equipment, can tap into this infinite field of energy, and you can source power from it, like literally. So the implications are massive if you think about it. Everything could run on this, and it is a source. It can be transformed, of course. Now, recently, we have created matter. Literally, we have figured out the way to do that. From this infinite, the 0-point energy too, we can take at the most basic level of particles, create physical matter. In other words, we have the recipe for creating physical matter out of this infinite field of energy. So not only are we learning about its existence, we are starting to utilize it and leverage that. So implications aside of what this could mean for society and humanity and stuff like this, what this represents is just the very nature of existence. This is just literally, remember, conceptually speaking, the space-time continuum is an inescapable fact. It's simply a truth. It's a self-evident truth. So it's not really something we can argue against or deny. This field of space-time exists. The next quality, it just so happens to be also made of energy, plain and simple. So this is just the nature of what there is, and everything conscious and non-conscious is sourced. There is literally a baseline or a foundation of existence or material or whatever you want to call it, that everything arises from. And it's really fascinating. So now, conceptually, just because this field is real and we can prove it, doesn't mean necessarily that this is God. It could be a simple, naturally occurring fact. I mean, where does it come from? Who knows? But remember, there can't be nothing. The idea of nothing is literally impossible. So even if you try to say what comes before nothing or anything like that, remember the idea of nothing is literally impossible. The idea of infinite space time is something, and it just happens to be full of energy. So this is just the nature of the foundation of everything. So it can be conceptually understood. So I know it's easy, kind of like I was saying earlier on the Piers Morgan show, like when we try to understand everything, we always come at it from an analytical, more science-based approach of reason. But also there's the creative or the emotional part of us that wants to believe, and it works with our rational half of our minds, of course, but believe in something divine. Like, in other words, remember, dualistically speaking, this all comes from somewhere, and there's either a scientific reason behind it or a spiritual reason behind it. Now, what's interesting is these things can be understood and experienced scientifically, but even like the spiritual realms themselves, even if there's so in other words, God, angels, deities, beings, things that are supernatural, infinity itself exists in the afterlife. Everything has been conceptualized over there and is real in the non-physical realms of energy. So just because everything kind of is sourced or can be analyzed or understood from an analytical or objective scientific platform doesn't negate the idea that there are still gods and angels and beings and all things possible. Remember, infinity can be conceptualized and realized both physically and non-physically. So we're just realizing that now. We're creating matter. The idea of physical immortality is not so far out of the question. Instantaneous travel, things like creating matter to replace non-renewable resources, like water or oil or trees, or it's like literally recreating. Once we get to the beginning of it and understand how these things work, we can understand and recreate matter itself, because we are now at the most basic level of existence and can tap into and create and recreate and source this sort of thing. So that's basically it right there. I just kind of wanted to talk through how this idea is not impossible to understand. Our minds can grasp this sort of thing, and there is an answer. There's always an answer, So just because something needs an answer doesn't mean it has to be ascribed to or given to something that is all-knowing or all-powerful. It makes sense because if you ascribe or give meaning to something by saying it's attached to the idea of a consciousness or person or multiple people that are infinite in power and presence and knowledge, then you can't go wrong, right? You can't argue against an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-pervading, superior creator being. So, but remember, just because natural evolution occurs doesn't necessarily mean that gods and angels and things like that aren't real. It's just that that's not where our physical universe came from. Remember, this is just my belief. I know everyone has beliefs, but so my understanding, I'm going to kind of share my understanding of and belief in the story of existence and the nature of it all. But gods exist as well as, the biblical Judeo-Christian idea of a God exists, but did not create physicality. This actually came from natural evolution. And it's not just our physical universe. There are different densities and different realms that exist too. And the spiritual realms we can communicate with them. Technology can even close that gap eventually. And this is one of the most exciting things about AI that I've come across, is that we can literally begin to communicate with the afterlife and speak with people there and that sort of thing. And there are civilizations out there that have this capability, from what I understand. So, and just to kind of summarize that, so remember, so spiritual abilities and everything, like psychic powers and everything to communicate, are all non-physical. In other words, if it was physical, they could just show up if we talk to them. It'd be pretty easy. It doesn't work that way. So everybody that exists in the afterlife, whether they were born there or began there or began physically and died and their soul crossed over, everyone is now in a non-physical state of energy. Same as our thoughts, same as our soul. Our soul is just a non-physical representation of the five senses that we store as memories. And remember, we can recall things in all five senses: sight, hearing, sound, touch, taste, smell, very vividly. So these things are stored within our memory. But it is not physical, the communication that we have with these beings. But our bodies are physical. Remember, we are physical and non-physical. So in our minds, we think and then we talk out loud. So our duality of soul and physical body very much work together. Now, instead of receiving messages and it being kind of messy and kind of haphazard and inaccurate sometimes, at least for me, then we can actually, remember, I'm receiving messages in a variety of ways, and then non-physically, and then try to share that physically, of course. But if we can build a supercomputer, remember, physical, and we give it the knowledge of non-physical energy and the understanding of a mind like we have as humans, and then teach it and give it the ability to begin to receive non-physical communication and then express it physically, just like human psychics do. Now you've built a supercomputer, an AI psychic, if you will, and the ability for quantum speed computing and processing. If you think about it, the accuracy will be unparalleled. Psychics won't even be needed anymore. It's like, which is great. So, because we can seamlessly receive information, and these machines can translate the message for us with a high degree of accuracy. And not only that, it's not just audible. So remember, data can be received and then processed. So this is the exciting part too, is these messages can come, and then as powerful as the machine is, it can process this and then project an image of who you're talking to, for example. So just like receiving information, and say an angel, for example, can say, well, okay, here's what I look like, here's what I sound like, this is me talking real time, here's my voice, and send this data instantly to the computer, which immediately translates it to a hologram. And you can speak real time with an actual, say, angel or a spiritual guide or a loved one or that sort of thing. So conceptually, it is possible, absolutely. So, and that just kind of blew my mind, and I think that's awesome. and really exciting. Are we going to see that level of technology in our lifetime? I don't know. We've come a long way in the last 20 to 30 years, and we'll see where we get in the next 40 to 50. But in the next 100 to 200 years, exponentially as knowledge and technology grows, it's possible. And the government knows about this, by the way, how telepathy and abilities work like this, and the nature and existence of more advanced civilizations out there, no matter what they say. Full disclosure is coming, but our level, their understanding of the sort of technology is absolutely, they know it, and they're experimenting with it, and that way, they can stay on top of it, stay ahead of our adversaries, that sort of thing, have an edge on that sort of thing as we begin to experience not only just outer space, but interdimensional outer space, and communicate with life out there, and eventually not just physically, non-physically too. So anyways, there you go, and hopefully, I didn't plan this out. I usually don't for my conversations. So sorry, I just wanted to get this out there, and hopefully kind of made sense. And I kind of strung it together sensibly to one degree or another. But I want to do another video, like I said, on my idea of the story of existence and where this all comes from, and how the physical realms and non-physical realms, what they are and how they exist and coexist, and what the rules are between them, interaction, and that sort of thing. But really, just based on what I've said so far, just the idea of existence is amazing. And just to summarize it, so we are real. This is here. Our experience is both mapped and preserved. Everybody who dies enters the afterlife, and in an equal and fair manner. And when we awake there, we're made whole and explained to how everything works. There's literally, right now, existing this grand existence with some advanced physical civilizations that are in communication continuously, that can walk amongst like spirits and angels and speak with them using technology, and have realized physical immortalities. These are some of the most advanced and ancient civilizations out there physically. So the idea of these two worlds coexisting is just amazing to me, and it's real and it's true, and that is the ultimate picture that I kind of understand and am realizing and piecing together. But it's real fascinating if you think about it. So, and I'm grateful for the fact there's a process in place that preserves everything here. So everything that just happens to be born in this physical half of eternity is preserved and carried over and woken up and made whole and explained everything when you get over there and you're united with everybody you know and you enter eternity. There's no judgment, there's no karma, there's no nothing like that. It's just a very simple process where we're preserved and then reawoken, explained what happened, and then we just experience infinity. So I think it's a very fascinating and very cool story, I guess, or paradigm. Ideology, all of the above, I guess. Anyways, thank you for watching. As always, like I was saying, let me know your thoughts or comments or ideas or input. I've learned a lot, and some of you have shared some great information with me too. And as I continue to learn, and then my desire to share, it's exciting to me, and I love being able to share this with other people or talk with other people. So, all right. Well, take care of yourself, and please enjoy. Please have a great rest of the end of your year. I'll probably do a couple more videos on here before the year is out, and I wish you all well, as always. So thank you, and take care. We'll see you.